So now it's time for our speakers. Our guest speakers today are our practitioners, Sarah Funk and Joe Larquin. For the year 2019, the Centers for Spiritual Living's theme is Spirituality in Action. And the April theme is Promoting Diversity and Inclusion. So both Joe and Sarah will be speaking on diversity making a difference. And I think first up is Sarah. Oh, it's Joe. Okay. Excuse me, I need to get another paper. Okay. So, Joseph Lurquin. Joe retired a few years ago after a 45-year career as an electrical engineer. And if you know Joe, you know he's an engineer. He's a precise man. He is a Penn State alumnus and a staunch Penn State supporter. He serves on 2 Penn State advisory boards and is chair of the Abington fundraising effort. Joe has been a member of the Greater Philadelphia Center for Spiritual Living for over 20 years and has served as a volunteer in many areas. He served 2 terms on the Board of Trustees, including one as president. He is currently a member of the Men's Wisdom Care Group and in the CSL Choir. He studied religious science with Reverend Bob Dean and Reverend Ian Taylor, becoming a licensed practitioner 10 years ago. And I would like you to welcome Joe Larquin.
Thank you, Ann. Now I need to get my notes in. We got notes everywhere up here. Can't find my folder. Oh, no, it's down here. Just bear with me. Good morning. As Ann said, I'm Joe Lurquin, religious science practitioner working with this center. The topic for April is diversity and inclusion. Reverend Dr. Maxine has been speaking about this throughout the month. Sarah and I will give you our perspectives on the subject. Diversity and inclusion are hot topics these days in corporate America. Many companies are offering classes and workshops to be sure employees are aware of what constitutes diversity and inclusion in the work environment. The corporate guidelines can apply across a spectrum of both work and personal lives. In studying diversity, I came across the phrase hidden bias and sought to recognize some of my own hidden biases. Let me offer a few for your consideration. Those who speak with an accent. I have a friend who advises she tends to find those speaking with a decidedly British accent as charming, knowledgeable, and compelling. This can also depend on the subject matter. So an Italian speaking about art or fine jewelry can be seen as perhaps more knowledgeable and worldly. Conversely, when watching NASCAR races on TV, which I like to do, the announcers speak with a heavy southern twang can, to our northern ears, appear more simplistic or country-like. Do you shudder at the high-pitched voice of some people? In order to be heard in a male-dominated industry, some women take voice instruction in order to project lower tones and authority. Those in broadcasting often train to eliminate regional accents to be more widely accepted. Appearance. Where did you grow up? You may not have been exposed to any people who looked or dressed differently than you. As we move about in this world, the diversity of other cultures comes into play. Today's children are exposed to many more cultures than in our youth. The opportunity to travel and experience diversity firsthand is important. The digital age has provided both positive and negative input daily into our lives and those of our children. Good, bad, not necessarily being aware of our hidden biases can be important. You may ask, how are biases formed? These can be as a result of early learning at home, church, school, and the playground. Some biases can be categorized as implicit or unconscious. I can include attitudes or stereotypes These include attitudes and stereotypes that affect actions and decisions unconsciously. These can reside deep in our subconscious. Life experiences, culture, and background can thus influence decision-making and behaviors towards others. Another category is bias explicit, which is conscious and controllable. Negativity in attitudes can be more prevalent when an economic threat is perceived. A third category can be referred to as subtle bias. These can be difficult to identify. These biases influence our ability to ask questions and to listen to answers without negativity. In any form of bias, it is important to remember that it is not the intentions, but the impact that counts. Once we uncover and examine our hidden biases, we are on the path to change our patterns of thinking. Go outside your comfort zone. Create connections, question your assumptions. Here at CSL, we like to think of our center as welcoming to all. We go to great lengths to ensure that this is true. We volunteer all who are interested in our care groups, our volunteer service teams, the classes, and strive to ensure diversity of opinions. Doing so keeps us going and growing as we move forward into our community and our world. Now I'd like to pass on to Sarah.
Thank you, Joe. I think it's important that, and it is out there, we're all starting to become aware of these unconscious biases. And so, like everything we do here, it's more awareness. That's what we're trying to generate, to bring the subconscious out to the conscious and really look at it and say, does this make sense? Well, no, it doesn't. Not if we come from the idea that we're all one. So thank you, Joe, for pointing that out to us. And now I'd like to introduce Sarah. After many, many years of spiritual searching, which began at an early age and continued right up to about 1997, Sarah found the Greater Philadelphia Center for Spiritual Living through a friend. And upon the first day of attending service, she was immediately aware that science of mind teaching was what she had been seeking all those years. In about 2009, Sarah had a direct message from Spirit that the next step for her was to become a practitioner in the science of mind teaching. She immediately began the process of doing so, and in 2012 became a licensed religious science practitioner. This changed her life. So I ask you to join me in welcoming Sarah.
Happy to see so many smiling faces. And thank you, Joe. Diversity, making a difference. Well, diversity is what we have. We see it everywhere. It's everywhere present, just like God. So we take nature as an example. No two snowflakes are alike, right? But when they come together, what do they create? A beautiful white blanket that brings a lot of peace before we have to start shoveling. And then we have no two grains of sand are alike. But when they come together, we have beautiful beaches that we love to lay on, walk on, sit on. And then in the stars in the sky, each one is different. But they create wonderful light for us at night, if it's a clear night. And I was writing my talk as I was sitting on my patio this week, and the sun was shining and bouncing off walls and things, and I thought of a saying by Rumi, and I like this a lot. He says, all religions, all this singing is one song. The differences are just illusion and vanity. The sun's light looks a little different on this wall than it does on that wall, and a lot different on the other one. But it is the same light. So diversity. In Creative Mind, Ernest Holmes says on page 38, we must see that we are one in the great one. And then we will not separate or divide, but unite and add to, until in time we will find that we are living in an entirely different world from that which we once thought. While God created each of us as unique and each individual, God sees no difference. God sees us as one of its divine expressions. This fact that there are many differences among the human race, the diversity, gives us an opportunity to learn from one another, to share our differences, rather than judge them. God always knows what it is doing. Seeing as God sees brings us peace, harmony, and removes us from judgment. Well, when I was raising my children, and I moved back here from New England, I was going through a divorce, and I met a group of people who were also going through divorces and wanting the best things for our children. And we got together and we decided to start a school. It was a wonderful coming together in community, much like this one, in that it was a loving presence, and it was felt like an extended family, which was very helpful for people going through divorce time. And we were a different school. The school districts around us did not like that. They really didn't. Talk about experiencing diversity. They just didn't like it. And we started the school in a home of one of the teachers, and it was up on a hill right off 113, and the children named the school up at Tina's. It was Tina Miller's house. And she was a teacher at Charlestown Play School, and so was the director of up at Tina's. They both taught at Charlestown Play School. So Charlestown Play School was all for what we were doing, but the school districts around us were not. And when we left Tina's house and we were looking for other places, well, we went from Tina's house to Valley Forge Mountain, the Nike site. And when we left there, we were looking for a place, and we got very negative response. What was wonderful was the children of our school went to all these meetings, because up at Tina's was a school of parents, teachers, and children, all three working together all the time, even in choosing the teachers. And we went to these meetings looking for another home, and the negativity was like, overwhelming. The kids never wavered. They never got into the negativity, neither did the rest of us. We were practicing the science of mind principles without even knowing we were doing so. It was wonderful. And we kept our focus, and the school was very successful. It lasted for over 40 years. And we finally had to close the doors because so much had changed. And diversity. Now there's homeschooling, there's charter schools, there's all these things. But it was a wonderful experience, and to move through being different and holding our own was just a magnificent thing to experience. So we know that the world is full of changes. As Joe mentioned, we all have hidden biases. And the word hidden is key, because we may think we don't have them. But upon truthful examination, we find them. They may be old ones, as Joe said, from when we were growing up, or we could even have new ones. So this topic of diversity and inclusion is more important than ever in the world today. We have the choice to move from thinking we have no biases to feeling the ones that we have. And once we feel them, we can decide to release those biases and accept the differences we all have. So I think of the 4 agreements, and I've made some agreements in my life, I think, that weren't mine. I grew up in a family that always said, well, there's not enough, there's not enough, there's not enough, when it came to finances. So I grew up thinking money and not enough went together. And so what do I have in my life? I have a challenge that way. But it's something I grew up hearing and learning, and we all hear these things. And so I'm working very much on that one, because it's not an agreement that I made. I think of the 4 agreements, and that was my parents' agreement. That's not mine, you know. And we have those things that come up, and a lot of them are biases, and it's stuff we hear that is not ours. So we don't have to buy into it. Hooray. So we have the choice from moving from thinking to knowing that God is all there is, and including other people is always important. And I think of Upatinas because we had all kinds of people there. Kids that were really having problems in school, and they felt a relief when they came there, and kids that just were happy to be there without any problems. But we had all different kinds, big and small, and they learned from each other. The big kids would help the little kids. It was just great. So remember, the divine presence lives within each and every person, and it's up to each of us to awaken this presence and help create a world that works for everyone. The fact that we're all one does not mean sameness. God created us to interact with one another, to share our differences, to learn to love each other just as they are. And I can tell you, becoming a practitioner really opened my eyes to the judgments I had and all of that. And so I was so happy that it changed my life and moved me away from those kinds of judgments and things. In our center, we have the perfect opportunity to create cultural bridges. And I think we are doing that because we do see the perfection in each one. Each one here is a unique addition to our center. Each is needed and important. We are required to look at things differently. Being inclusive and growing is crucial both personally and for our center. We are called centers for spiritual living, all capitals. We are living this teaching. And he wrote it down for us, Ernest Holmes did. He asked us to embody these principles in his 1959 sermon by the sea. He asked us to embody those and take the message of inclusion out into the world, both personally and as a center, not fighting for things but standing for what is true, that we're all connected and all created from the same source. So how do we show up in the world? What can you do today and every day to include those who have different ideas than yours, to include those who may look different, to include those who may have a political difference? Well, we do this by paying attention to who we're talking to. Who's in the room? If you're in a room full of people that think very differently than you do politically, are you going to get up and argue? I don't think so. By listening, and we learn this in our care groups, by learning to listen to each other, that's how we grow. Appreciating each person's idea, each person's freedom to feel safe enough to express who they are. We have that here, and we take it out into the world. There is a practitioner in Dallas, Texas, Tracy Brown, and she wrote a book called Stained Glass Spirit. And really she talks about each person in their center being a piece of that stained glass. And together, when you have a stained glass, you have a beautiful window. So we know that we are those living windows. We listen to others. We listen to ourselves, and if a bias comes up, we address that by remembering who we are, one of the divine, and so is everyone else. So we include all in our prayers and treatments. It is how we make a difference for ourselves, for each other, and for the world. And I just got this book called The Way I Am by Dr. Jim Terrell. And it's about the metaphysical Jesus. I've asked Diane to get it for the bookstore because I think it's something we are all going to really enjoy. But in here, he says, Jesus didn't care if you were a Jew, Gentile, or Roman. God causes the sun to rise on both the bad and the good and sends rain on both the just and the unjust. That's Matthew 5, verse 45. So these words from Jesus, the words from Ernest Holmes, the words from in our own heart, tell us to embrace the differences because that makes life more interesting.
Thank you, Sarah. You gave us a lot of nuggets there with the agreements. You know, we don't have to live other people's agreements. We make our own. And I love that stained glass explanation. That's what we all are, and the light shines through us.